Great soundtracks are not new to games, building tension and atmosphere and unlocking emotional depth like few other mechanics can, but Clair Obscur's soundtrack goes far beyond that in ways you could never have known by revealing not just the story, but repeatedly, in some cases, very clearly telling the ending in another language as you played. And for a game built entirely around concealing the truth behind knowledge barriers, hiding spoilers behind a language barrier thematically is very fitting. Just take the very first song we hear, Alicia, that plays over the title screen. By design, it has very few revealing phrases, which almost makes the referenced names stand out more. Maelle, Alicia, Lune, Verso. This song actually bookends the start and the finish of the game, with the finale version being sung in French and its lyrics adding an essential layer of context to the final seconds of the ending, which takes place inside of the canvas. So we'll loop back round to that before the end. For now, hearing Maelle and Alicia's names linked is a pretty key giveaway, even if it's on a subconscious level. The story then begins in Lumiere, and the words we hear require a smidgen of creative license to untangle, but in essence they define the start and the end of the full story. In this ethereal place, Gustave watches over the dome. This is where the game starts, Gustave gazing across Lumiere, which is later revealed during conversations to indeed be sitting beneath a protective dome. Renoir will claw at the roof. And this is the annual gommage, because in his weakened state beneath the monolith, the Paintress has restricted Renoir to killing off just one generation of Lumiere residents at a time. Troubles with erasure will bend the Eiffel. Now they're talking about the fracture, which was of course Renoir's first attempt to wipe Aline's precious canvas, triggering the story of how the expeditioners began. Now, I don't want to distract from the facts here, but the actual Eiffel Tower was designed by an engineer called Gustave Eiffel, and his inspiration for the lovable engineer Gustave is just another example of a fun fact that's unlikely to have survived the journey beyond France's borders. These names and reveals, as subtle as they might be, have already made an appearance before the games even tried to make you hemorrhage your first tear. Speaking of which, when the gommage arrives, we next hear the song Renoir play, and while the emotional depth of the scene no doubt steals away your attention, there is also no dialogue spoken, and so there's little else to distract from the names that are sprinkled throughout the 34 cryptic words that make up the song. These names are Alina, which is spoken 5 times, Verso twice, and Renoir and Alicia once each. We're not even out at the prologue yet, and all in, Alicia and Renoir have been named twice, 3 times for Verso and 5 times for Alina. Just, in case you're wondering who the important characters to listen out for are in the remainder of the soundtrack. Yeah, also, if you're wondering how French players handled this, by the way, I did discuss it with a few and I'll cover their perspectives before the end, but for context, it isn't just French that's used for the lyrics. There's actually some English, as well as Latin, and seemingly a French dialect called Occitan, which folds Catalan and Spanish and Italian into the mix too, and this gave creator Lorien Testard license to be very creative when it came to constructing the lyrics, indulging in an almost Shakespearean practice of twisting words and phrases into new words to make them rhyme, meaning a lot of players would come to ignore the often odd-sounding lyrics, leaving him to plant key phrases in plain sight. He's been relatively tight-lipped about how he constructed the lyrics, but he did explain in an interview to RPG Fan that when converting the lyrics of the French-sung Maelle to the sister track Alicia, the game's first and final tracks that I mentioned earlier, he converted the words via a cipher of sorts, and this allowed him to construct lyrics that sounded intentionally medieval, as he described it. And this is a particular fact that's been misquoted all over the internet, with fans claiming half the soundtrack is in a made-up medieval language, but that's actually not as insightful as it sounds, because French and English are also medieval languages after all. Speaking of English, when Gustave first finds his feet, the game does what it does best by peeling back a layer of mystery to see if you're listening, which of course you probably weren't, because if you were, you'd hear the song Linen and Cotton, sung clear as day in English, in which Aline, the paintress herself, makes a direct plea.
It will be blown.
let's unpack this. Linen and cotton blend is describing a canvas. Feel the ink flowing in your veins is not exactly subtle, as it alludes to becoming aware that you're painted fabrication. It will be the blood of your life, alluding to how vulnerable you are, your life being tied to something as fragile as ink. Give up the knife. This is literally the Paintress saying, lay down your weapons and don't do this. You've just begun a hunt for the all-powerful Paintress, and the first thing you hear is a female voice in English talking of a canvas and saying, literally, there is ink flowing through your veins, it's your lifeblood, so put down your weapons. But did we hear it? Did we hell? Too busy trying to figure out whether there's any chroma hidden behind these bushes on the edge of the path.
Swim.
Back to French, and a good few hours later, the world map in Act 2 introduces a song called Déchire la Toile, or Tears the Canvas, which you'll hear a lot as you move around the island. And even with my dodgy French, I picked up lines like Verso will tear the canvas and Maelle sadness. And while most French gamers that I spoke to said that they ignored what they thought were vague thematic references, one I spoke to did compare this song to being caught off guard by a movie trailer that teases so many details it risks giving away the plot. Interestingly, she cited the song's repetition as the main issue because it gets played so often when you navigate the continent, and it led her to surmise that Maelle was a trapped paintress before the big reveal. And if you clock on to the fact that tearing the canvas just means having a big impact on the canvas, then personally I think she got lucky that's all she picked up, because this song actually spells out both endings to the game if you focus in and decide for yourself. First, I think it could only be the finale to Act 2. Verso will tear the canvas. Maelle's sadness endures. We all die. Alicia will tear the canvas. Renoir feels broken. After this, it's the struggle that defines the canvas. Aline created a condemned world. Renoir helped, but will always lose his son. And then we get the ending in which Alicia is pushed out of the canvas. Verso dreams once more. Maelle waits for eternal sunshine. And then we get the ending in which Maelle remains in the canvas. Verso will tear the canvas. Maelle's sadness will endure. Love will die. Alicia will tear the canvas. Renoir cries. Verso dreams again. Aline is locked away, presumably in the real world, away from the canvas. Without any context, for sure this doesn't mean all that much, and context does vary greatly between player journeys, but at the very least Verso's insidious agenda is highlighted earlier on, and Maelle's significance is reinforced way before it's revealed in the larger story. The mighty Dualliste can be found shortly after in his lair of gore and horror, and this one-time theme reveals Renoir has shattered. Renoir has removed and stole her land. So on the vaguest level, we get that Renoir is the aggressor, not on the ground level where we are, but in regards to this big picture we're trying to formulate. And then we hear, Aline dares. Trapped, she escapes. Her mind is lost. So without even reading into it all, we know Renoir oppresses Aline, and she pushes back, but it drives her insane.
Just try it.
Next up, we have perhaps one of the best moments of the entire game. It's Act 2, and the Paintress is beyond this door. Between you stands Renoir, whose cruel actions included one that bonded you with the expeditioners when he snatched their cherished friend, and your lovable protagonist whose plot armor you'd taken for granted, crafting a resentment that spans both sides of the screen.
We'll find a way to kill him.
Even his son condemns him to his fate. Everybody is pumped up to take down Renoir with a vengeance. And remember that we don't know yet that Verso, who's exhausted from a lifetime of death, has resolved to expel his mother from the canvas to save her sanity, sacrificing everybody around him not out of spite, but a deeply instilled love that he inherited from the true Verso.
That son was a stranger. But you're not.
And only in hindsight can we see the irony of the situation. You, being Expedition 33, are fighting to protect Lumiere. Painted Renoir, who fights to save his family by defending the Paintress, stands resolute against the expeditioners, year after year after year, making him the true guardian of all life on the canvas, and by extension, the people of Lumiere.
What's my fault? What is this?
You should never have come.
Like desperate parents who are seemingly unable to speak to their children and all out of ideas, Painted Renoir uses his actions, and the Paintress uses songs, and like defiant children, you misinterpret their warnings, this child-parent rift being a common theme in the game. But more importantly, at this critical moment, you're replicating the moral clash between true Renoir and Aline, as you fight for the true Renoir in his bid to destroy the canvas. The divine argument that fuels this fight is sung in French with vivid clarity. Their first clash caused the fracture, and their last clash will cause the end of the world, effectively bookending the entire story. And this ongoing struggle is the linchpin to understanding everything. And it is literally spelled out to you, and you're too busy fighting Painted Renoir on behalf of true Renoir, knocking down the last obstacle to Aline's salvation, and ironically the last pillar that supports your existence. And it goes like this. Blazing colours. Fiery red, life taken. This is of course a reference to the fire that killed Verso. A painting I cannot see. Close my eyes, darkness remains. There is no escaping her grief. In the dark, she sees sadness. Through gold, his laughter persists. In every colour, a part of him. Verso's presence can be felt everywhere in the canvas. To love him still, even if he's no longer here. Painting love, painting life. Crying in colour. On the canvas, our love remains and dies. I love you. As the fight begins with the faster-paced second verse, cycling the track then reveals the lyrics that precede this, sung between Aline and Renoir. Stop loving me. I will always love you. Let go of this brush, this canvas. Aline, Renoir. I will always paint. Stop painting. Let go of this brush. Leave this canvas. Aline. They then repeat these lines, saying painting love, painting life, crying in colour, and when Aline sings on the canvas our love remains, Renoir sings over her on the canvas our love dies, followed by I love you. When Aline says our love, she's referring to their shared love for Verso, because this canvas is the only place their cherished son remains. When Renoir says our love dies, he's talking of their love for one another, and he follows this by saying, I love you. He's clarifying that it is her love for him that's dying, as she sacrifices real, tangible love in order to wallow in falsified memories from less painful days. And if this wasn't a metaphor for the struggle of marriage, especially when navigating the unbearable scenario of a lost child, then I don't know what is. And shortly after this, you face the Paintress, and still unaware of the big reveal, we approach her slowly, and with no dialogue to cover the words, no action to distract. The opening lines of the song called Aline are sung with perfect clarity, and they say, get out and run away. I beg you, flee this cursed painting, this canvas of false life. The next verse is muffled by dialogue, but if you're minded to, you can hear dream portrait, imperfect, chain of your freedom. The brilliance here is how, in part due to the female vocals, it wouldn't occur to you that this isn't the Paintress singing, but it's not. These are the words running through Verso's mind as he prepares to expel her from the canvas, backed up by every conversation he's had in front of you to this point.
You need to go home.
Listen again. Get out and run away, I beg you. Flee this cursed painting, this canvas of false life, this imperfect dream portrait, this chain to your freedom. Verso has resolved to defeat and free her, condemning everybody around him to death, and these are the words running through his head. I posed a question to all French players on Reddit's Expedition 33 forum in regards to how they felt the lyrics impacted their understanding of the unfolding story, and I got dozens of insightful responses, and plenty said that they ignored the lyrics because words like canvas and verso seemed so on theme, but were otherwise too cryptic to waste energy on, and others snagged some clues, but usually after or in tandem to the game connecting the dots for you, and one quite touching comment outlined how she resonated with quite a few of the tracks having lost her mother recently. One in particular, called Nerutzel's Mad, carefully detailed her journey, and I think left me in pretty much no doubt to the extent of the early insight the songs provided her. She explained that Alicia's line from the very first cinematic, "Those who don't know they exist," immediately suggested to her that the world was artificial.
Those who know not that they are not.
Clues like Maelle's constant déjà vu reinforce this, and Gustave's resemblance to Renoir, although coincidental and one I actually agree with, hinted at time travel or parallel universes. And then the world map theme mentions Verso will tear the canvas and Aline imprisoned, hinting at the world being a prison. The line from Renoir's fight, Verso embraced, Verso erased, reinforced her growing theory that this world, a literal canvas, was painted into existence by Aline and Renoir to escape a traumatic reality relating to Verso. Considering Alicia's early statement about the characters not truly existing, Verso was possibly erased from reality and sustained within this artificial realm. Later in the Paintress's song, she pleads, "Flee this cursed painting." This confirmed to her that the world is a fabricated escape from grief, with Aline's children replicated inside.
You're going to kill yourself.
The moment Aline appears on screen when fighting the real Renoir, the song actually jumps to the lyrics, "Alina will suffer, Alina will cry," and this left her conflicted because the game was giving mixed signals, leaving her to wonder if maybe she wasn't doing the right thing by saving Lumiere. By concentrating on the cutscenes and concentrating on the lyrics, the revelation about the world being in a painting wasn't too hard to come by, what with the antagonist being called the Paintress, and it did come to her some time before the intended reveal, but she felt that unpacking an additional layer of mystery was a welcome addition. That said, considering what she and all the other French players said, you clearly have to want to extract the clues from the music, because simply hearing them isn't enough to unravel the clues. Now, looping right back to the start, the song Alicia that plays on the title screen, fans often refer to Maelle's ending as the bad one, and on the surface there is a strong argument for it. In the run-up to the ending, Maelle insists that things will be different if she stays while her all-powerful Paintress mother is seen on her knees going insane.
I'm not, Mum. I'm not going to lose myself if I stay.
And by contrast, the far older, wiser Verso exhibits an unwavering and somber clarity as he heads towards self-sacrifice. And during the ending, from Maelle's oddly placid expression and Verso's clear distress, through to the ominous jump scare moment, the implications do seem pretty clear. That said, during her final moments with painted Alicia, Maelle notes that her broken form is a cruel reflection of her mother's ongoing bitterness.
She blames us, doesn't she?
Because Aline forever blames her for Verso's death.
You didn't deserve that.
You're too weak to do anything useful.
Clear is snide at best and cruel at worst, and so what's really waiting for Alicia in the real world except for a mute, crippled existence, and further risk from the writers? So Maelle's ending might be worse, but on the surface level at least, Verso's ending hardly offers a cathartic resolution to Alicia's journey either. And that's where things get interesting, and requires a little bit of unpacking. You see, lead writer Jennifer Svedberg-Yen explained very clearly to Polygon that the endings were written so as to leave them up to the player based on who they identified with, and what felt right to them, and that there was in fact no good or bad ending. and that seemed odd considering that the tone certainly felt more hopeful outside the canvas, but her skills as a writer are undeniable, and so it was only when I chose to work backward from the idea that they're both supposed to offer closure, and only when I took the lyrics into account did I find it, in my opinion anyway. For all of the narrative revelations, we never really find out if the world of the canvas is the result of the Dessandre family having literal superpowers to create living worlds, or if the canvas is meant as an elaborate metaphor for any kind of art really that's so deeply infused with the imprint of the artist that, in one's grief, it is possible to lose years inside it, warping the original work until it barely resembles them. And if you're struggling to understand what that means, then, for example, watching old videotapes of a lost loved one night after night until your own memories are literally overwritten by the perspective of whoever held the camera, that would be a real-world example of this. It's not quite elaborate as a canvas full of life, but that is an example of losing yourself and warping your own memories with an artistic medium that holds an imprint of the artist inside of it. We as players may be seeing the art of the canvas through a complex filter for the sake of the narrative, like a child who recalls the fantasy world they've dreamed up and not the worn out toys that they were playing with. And so whether or not you believe that the canvas is real, or whether you think that it's a metaphor, in the end I concluded that the answer to that very question dictates the best ending. And the idea that the canvas is a giant metaphor isn't actually as far-fetched as you might think. Let me explain. Firstly, to argue for Verso's ending, and in my opinion that is to argue for it being a metaphor for one very simple reason. Having the power to create life does not give you the right to take it away. From the harrowing accounts that talk of keeping children safe in bunkers, children who we know are going to die starving and alone in the dark after their parents have been brutalized by Clair's Nevrons, to the countless battlegrounds and literal bloodbaths that you traverse, the level of barbarism evident in the painter's treatment of their creations is beyond forgivable. But if this were a metaphor for the trail of destruction that's left in one's mind if they chose to wallow in the past, as their family lovingly wrestles them out of their depression over many years, then the sadness and the trauma, well, it makes sense and it carries a lot of weight. Other times, it's in the details. Take Esquier, the most powerful creature in the universe, who oddly lives for just one thing: to give cuddles and to offer comfort in the dark.
You are the best.
There is no greater metaphor for how a child views the toy that they clutch at night, and the entire canvas was created by young Verso's mind. The canvas was silly and fun until Aline arrived and in her grief painted the city of Lumiere and its condemned people to house her resurrected family. And when Renoir and Clair arrived, well, then the strange city became an absolute hellscape. Everything beautiful and pure came from a child's innocent mind, and everything warped and cruel came from the adults with self-serving agendas. But the real giveaway comes when you stop and consider who the shadowy faction opposing the painters really are.
The writers used you against us once before. They won't hesitate to use you again.
The writers who set the fire that killed Verso, manipulated and scarred Alicia, and whom Clair swears to defy to reclaim the Dessandre family narrative. Who are they? Well, most likely, none other than the writers of Clair Obscur itself, a meta-revelation that was never confirmed but implied to be a genuine possibility. And that changes everything, because accepting this means accepting the entire world of Clair Obscur is a construct, a simple fiction that can be switched off without consequence. And so the same logic can then be applied to the world that exists one level down, in Lumiere. Much like taking the red pill in the Matrix, you're choosing to open your eyes to the reality of this world and accepting that to live in a beautiful dream is not to live at all. So that's the argument for the metaphor, but I think that there is still a very acceptable argument against it too. And as I said, it can only be found by listening to the lyrics. But before we explore that, let's just finish this side of the argument by looking at the words sung during Verso's ending.
This is what we created the expeditions for.
Tomorrow comes.
The expeditioner's motto is "Tomorrow Comes," which is of course revealed to be tragically ironic when we realise that the completion of their mission means to ensure that tomorrow would never come. And so when Alicia is ejected from the canvas, the epilogue plays out to a song with a contrasting title named "To the Unwritten Tomorrows."
Miroir du temps.
The poetry sung in this song would take a whole video to unpack, with lines like "Mirror of time, our stories align," reflecting on the same stories and mistakes that reoccur over generations, and "In the hollow of our hands, two worlds take shape," which I believe alludes to chaos theory, or the butterfly effect, or the ripple effect, the idea that we shape everything we touch, be it art or the wider world, and as art can impact the wider world, and the world can impact art, in essence, everything we touch is connected, and in this case, the world inside the canvas and outside the canvas, or the past and the future, will always be connected. But aside from the title, "To the Unwritten Tomorrows," which obviously means to look to the future, I think that the lines we're looking for are "Blank canvas, distant horizon," which reinforces the title by saying that now the canvas is wiped, or your memories are compartmentalized, then now you can see the long future ahead of you. And this is followed by "Let's paint together the colours of tomorrow," colours being of particular importance because it means let us build colourful new memories together, and that then gives you something joyful to look back on. And finally, consider that throughout the story, the words darkness, twilight, and nighttime are all linked symbolically and get used interchangeably in dialogue and lyrics alike to describe sadness, and I think for lack of a better term, depression. Take Fading Boy, who represents the last of true Verso himself, and he references all three words in a single sentence at one point when he says, "A lost soul, adrift in twilight. Her paintbrush wielded darkness. Will you put an end to her night?" In other words, she's drowning in sadness. Will you help her break free of her depression? The French term Clair Obscur, interestingly, is a form of art that creates depth by focusing on the contrast between light and dark. And so the final line I want to note is, in the Clair Obscur, infinite artworks, each step traces the road of a life. In other words, there is no light without dark. I mean, you simply cannot find happiness without experiencing sadness. And to enjoy life's many pleasures means accepting that you need to navigate both on your journey of life. And the importance of this line, which emphasizes the importance of pushing forward and not succumbing to despair by trapping yourself in the past, carries immense weight because it's literally the title of the game. So to free Alicia is to believe that the canvas is a metaphor for being trapped in the past, and to face the future no matter what the challenge is the only way forward. But here's the thing. You know who also believes that? Verso. Verso also believes that. Not painted Verso, true Verso, who created the world and never expected his family to become trapped in it. His perspective doesn't take into account the people of Lumiere because they did not exist by the time that he died. Painted Renoir tells us that he inherited the pain of losing his son.
The pain of losing you, she made me inherit it.
And a century later, he still carries another Renoir's pain. Alicia still suffers the wounds of the fire, and because Painted Verso is Aline's most accurate duplication, he suffers from the belief that the memories he left behind, that is to say, the canvas, is a crippling burden on his family. He loved his canvas, but the cost is nothing, because in his memory it's just a piece of art.
Ciel was right. Grief blinds us. All you see are walls.
And this is why he betrays the entire canvas and sacrifices everybody he loves in order to expel Aline, and then does it once more to expel Alicia too. And so Alicia's choice to remain, if considered in the context of a metaphor, which is the perspective that Painted Verso battles with every single day, would mean her steady detachment from the real world as she loses herself one day at a time. That is why Verso is so uncomfortable when everybody else is happy. But let's argue for a moment that it's not a metaphor, and that the canvas is a living place built through magic, and Renoir's actions do amount to genocide. Well, consider first that for all of his warnings, after 100 years of facilitating life for thousands, here is the woman who has been driven insane. She's not exactly cackling in a rocking chair, so she might be affected, but she certainly doesn't look broken. And if Alicia wishes to carry the torch forward for a period of her life, perhaps then it's Renoir's desperate bid to cling on to control that should be examined here.
I am not doing this again!
Perhaps he's exercising his godlike power to execute thousands simply to keep his house in order. The Belle Epoque era upon which the game was based was every bit as renowned for its legacy of brutal colonial expansion as it was for arts and science, and so Renoir ruthlessly cleansing the land of life is actually, as hard as it might be to hear, quite apt for the period. Now, remember the first song called Alicia from the title screen? It's called Alicia because from the opening moments, we're seeing the story from her perspective. But the lyrics are confusing because Alicia is confused. She doesn't know who she is. And then when she chooses to remain in the canvas, this song, played with the exact same melody and the words now making sense in French, is called Maelle. Some might say it's because the cycle remains unbroken, but I would argue that it represents maturity or evolution because she's putting aside her Alicia life while she chooses to live as Maelle. Now that she knows who she is, the words make sense. When Maelle enters with a child that she seems close to, the lyrics offer us a clue as to what's going on. Throughout the story, Lune and Ciel are the two romance options for Verso, but as Ciel is reunited with Pierre, and Lune is free to pursue her own path, which lightly relates to music, just like Verso, it does make sense that the two of them would end up together. What we see is Lune greeting the child like a mother might, and the lyrics, which effectively serve as an epilogue, might just be the most important lyrical reveal of all. And it goes like this. Maelle has a life to paint. Sweet, faded star Alicia has a life to paint. Verso at night has the moon near him. Now, it's easy to miss with so much happening, like finally seeing what Pierre looks like, or a resurrected Gustave flashing his smile again, but these words tell a happy story. Maelle has a life to paint, meaning her life inside the canvas, which meant more to her than the one outside, is preserved. Sweet faded star Alicia has a life to paint, meaning that Alicia, who has unfairly been reduced to a shadow of her former self, gets a new lease on life inside the canvas that she never would have achieved outside. And then there is Verso. As I said before, references to darkness and nighttime are often substituted for sorrow and sadness, and Lune is French for moon, so Verso at night has the moon near him is a beautiful allegory for saying Verso's sadness is alleviated by Lune being in his life, as well as saying he spends his nights with her, explaining the only child in the front row. When Maelle defeats Verso, he says he doesn't want this life.
I don't want this life.
But he doesn't then say, "Don't bring me back." What he says is,
Help me.
which version of himself he's talking about isn't entirely obvious. We know that the painter's creations are tied to their emotional state of mind, that they choose which memories to implant.
Punishment, perhaps.
That Alicia disapproves of how her mother subjected her paintings to her own grief. But in the scenario that we believe that saving Lumiere is the right choice, the best way to save him is to release him from the burden of having true Verso's thoughts lingering in the back of his mind. And yet, Verso's perspective implies that she hasn't stripped him of everything because he still fears for her. And that is actually a good thing because it means she's treating her memories with respect. She isn't overreaching with her powers. The black and white, the ratio transforming from widescreen to classic 4:3, being blind to the happiness that we've just seen is right in front of him. These are visual cues that Verso feels pulled back into the past, forced to relive the same fears again. The lyrics have reliably spelt out the truth throughout, and it's no different here, with them now telling us that Alicia is leaning on love to manage his trauma responsibly. And so in the words of the painted boy, Verso is no longer a lost soul adrift in twilight, or no longer is he alone in his despair, because now when he falls, he has Lune to pick him back up. Which means in time, hopefully Verso will find happiness. And the Descendre family may not be repaired, although with a bitter mother, and a snide sister, and a genocidal father, and a marriage rocky enough to trigger an apocalypse, well, how long is that going to last anyway, so good luck with that. What we do know is that half of Ciel's dialogue is devoted to her love for Pierre, and there he is. Gustave gets to woo the woman that he loves. Lune has a life that she chose and not one forced upon her by her parents, which is exactly the same for Alicia, and indeed the music clarifies this in very clear terms. Alicia gets a life to live, Maelle gets a life to live, and Lune, who staunchly championed the canvas's preservation, and Verso, who sacrificed everything to trigger its change. Only when they come together would they find happiness. Order and chaos, yin and yang, light and dark, clair obscur. The life we seek is found in between these opposing forces. And right there is that life. And Verso is nervous because he knows he might lose it. And that's natural because that is life. And so if Jennifer Svedberg-Yen's vision is to be respected, then I would sum it up like this. On one hand, Alicia's departure breaks a cycle. While it also means abandoning a world that holds echoes of the people she loved, she and her family achieve the freedom to build a new life, and Verso's memories are left to rest in peace. Or Alicia remains, and the Descendre family allow their children the freedom to make their own mistakes and hope that they take into account what they learned from their parents. Mistakes of the past aren't guaranteed to repeat, and that is the value of love and guidance, and most importantly, mutual respect. One choice leans into hope and the other into freedom. Neither is wrong. Just as the song presents the line, one painted with dreams and the other naked and real, so too does the game offer two equally human responses to grief. And whether Alicia chooses to preserve or to move on, both paths are steeped in love, and both come with cost.
I hope you enjoy plundering the many depths of this multi-layered game. Good day to you.
If you enjoyed my perspective or took away something from this video, which I really hope you did, I would be super grateful for a like or even a sub, as I've got more of these deep dives I want to line up and I really could do with the support. Obviously I may have misinterpreted things along the way. If you have a different perspective on anything I've said, be sure to let me know in the comments. Take care and hopefully see you next time.